Hello and welcome to Shadow of the Cast, a Marvel Champions podcast. I'm Villain Fury and I'm here with Nelson. Had to think about that. And
Wow, thanks, man.
no guest
Am I that
today.
forgettable?
No, we've had guests. No.
No, that's fair. That's fair. I would like to discuss aggression, the red aspect of Marvel Champions. That is today's topic. We're kind of doing a start of a new mini series. Is it a mini series if it like almost doubles our episodes? I guess it's probably not at that point, right? Anyways, it's a new series where we're talking about the aspects. And so we're going to be talking about aggression. I guess we've technically already done pool as well. So we're already deep into this series. So
yeah, we did
the red
multi-aspect.
aspect. We did multi-aspect. Wow. Man, I should really listen to our podcast.
All the cool kids are doing it.
All the cool kids are doing it. But yes, we're happy that you're here. I'm excited to talk about aggression because aggression is one of those aspects that I didn't like as much at first. Like it was towards the bottom of my list. But the more I play it, the more cards that come out, I feel like aggression has been more and more supported. And I've started to enjoy aggression more and more as the game lives longer. So I'm ready to dive into this one.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about aggression as well. Aggression is what you feel when somebody forgets your name, but it's also it's also pretty good at dealing damage in Marvel Champions. And I've famously / infamously said aggression is my sort of joint favorite aspect in Marvel Champions, and I think that does hold up today. Though it's very close. I think it's very close between all the aspects. And I've done some polls on my channel recently, and all the aspects are really close. But I think aggression has slightly pulled behind. So that might be interesting to talk about why people feel that way. And I think I'm going to kick things off with a question from Brady McCann, who just simply asks, favorite heroes to use in aggression?
Oh, there's so many. And like what I like about this question is because we have so many different archetypes in aggression, really all of the aspects at this point, there are so many different ways that you can approach this question. You can go just like, I'm just going to swing really hard with my basic attack. And for something like that, I really like She-Hulk. I like Ant-Man with the giant strengths and everything. And you can really kind of exploit that high attack. And that's probably one of my... I enjoy playing it, but it's probably not the most interesting way to play aggression. I really like the Ally Boot Camp. Oh, okay, no, this is my answer. I really like Storm with Boot Camp, Ally Army. That's my answer. Now, I had to think about it for a second, but kind of that troop commander, I'm going to just run and everything's going to have 900 attack. That's my favorite way to play. What about you?
It's really difficult. You know, there are some heroes like Black Widow is, I would say, not best in aggression, but I love playing her in aggression. I like to go all in on the assassin theme, use Lion Weight alongside, Widow's Bite, because you can get some damage on the minions that are coming in, which is a unique way to damage minions, which other heroes typically don't. Not any other character really plays Lion Weight normally, so that's kind of interesting. One of my favorites to play is Black Panther. When I first played the game, he was the first hero I played, and eventually I branched out to aggression. I think it was a deck from Marvel CDB, with Yarnborn. So I use Wakanda Forever, activate some of his attacks, sort of Black Panther upgrades, and then I can activate Yarnborn off all of those. So it's kind of like 2 damage, 2 damage, 2 damage, 4 damage, 2 damage, kind of little chain reaction. I don't know if there's too many 2 damages there. That's really fun. But I'm going to tell you my favorite hero, my favorite build even, that I've been playing kind of recently. And that is Wolverine, who typically, I'm going to say it, was my least liked X-Men for a long time. Still liked him, but least liked. Playing him with the new full body charge. So I can use his claws to take 4 damage to play this big 4 cost attack. But this attack, when you're below half health, it gets overkill. So I'm bringing myself below half health with the claws to then get the overkill on the card. And if I can sneak in like Moment of Triumph to heal back up afterwards, just such a satisfying combo, yeah. So that's kind of what I'm feeling right now. But I really think what you're saying about, all these different ways you can play aggression, there's kind of a way for every character to play it. There's not one character I think, oh, don't play them in aggression. Scrolling through the list, maybe I'll find one, but I think it works for everybody, which is really fun.
Yeah. And so I guess like with the different ways that we can play aggression, how does that change when you look at it from a true solo lens versus a multiplayer lens? Because I think aggression is one of those aspects that kind of can fall. It's got higher highs and lower lows than I think some of the other aspects when you add more players to the game. As you add more players, aggression is incredible at minion control, and just so you're gonna get more minions. And so, what do you think about the aggression from like a true solo sense compared to a multiplayer game?
I think aggression changes significantly. And I think this might be why some people maybe don't prefer it quite as much, because I do think it struggles a lot more in solo compared to multiplayer. Whereas, just this, you're going to have a good time in solo, you're going to have a good time in multiplayer. It's not going to take a lot of effort to get to that point. But aggression sometimes lacks a bit for thwarting. So when I'm building a solo aggression deck, my first thought is generally, okay, how am I going to deal with threat with this deck? Or am I going to rush with this deck and ignore the threat? Threat is my big thing that I'm thinking about. And typically I'm thinking about that with every aspect, but that is the big thing. Whereas in multiplayer, I get to go damage, and more damage. I just get to hit things, and there are more things for me to hit. There's little pinatas, minions that I can go for. And
No, they are now forever called pinatas. Yeah.
I mean, I think one of the big changes is when I play aggression in multiplayer. Normally, I'm thinking, okay, my role here is to deal with the minions for everyone at the table. Whereas in solo, I still kind of deal with everything a normal solo player would deal with.
Yeah. Yeah. I my second favorite way to play aggression really only is viable in a multiplayer game because it takes so long to set up. But I love the overkill side of aggression, which kind of leans into a little bit more of that minion control. But you have cards like follow through, you have cards like into the fray, you have cards that deal with dealing excess damage to enemies, and finding ways to exploit that is just makes me happy. And so like the follow through, I think it's a really fun card, but in solo, it's a tough ask, especially against some of these villains that come out swinging. And so I agree with you. I think that there's a pretty big shift in how you're going to play solo versus multiplayer, and it kind of I think is kind of leads us into our next question. This one's actually from Daring Lime, which is aggression the worst aspect? Which I love this question, by the way. It's great.
Oh, Daring Lime, what are we going to do with this? I mean, is aggression the worst aspect? It depends how you define it worst. Is it the least fun aspect? I don't think so. I think it's very fun. But is it worst in terms of power, in terms of solo play? I would probably say yes. So I don't think it's the worst aspect. It's one of my favorite aspects, but it definitely has some challenges in solo play. Again, mostly relating to the thwarting. When I'm building for solo play, it's very hard not to flood my deck with basic allies.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, what do you think?
It's no. But I think it is a question. It's a valid question, right? I think protection used to hold that title,
Yeah.
bar none. And protection has gotten so much love over the last couple of waves with the different ways that you can play and just like all the types of support that protection has gotten. And I feel like aggression has got some new ways to play. We got hone technique. Now this is, years ago at this point, so maybe it's not new. But we've got like hone technique. We've got some more of the different ways to play, but I feel like aggression is the one that has been least innovated on over the years. Maybe leadership, but leadership's just good. But I think with that, aggression has started to fall in power level, except for kind of the rush. I think rush has gotten pretty decent, especially in true solo.
Yeah, that's really interesting. We have a question here from Nick McDonald, which I think kind of ties into this. And they said, how do you feel about the build diversity and aggression? Because from my perspective, aggression does kind of the least amount of things of all the aspects. It mainly just does damage. Justice has, some kind of, encounter card control a bit. We have protection with readying, healing, as well as defending, things like that. But aggression just wants to hit things. But I like the build diversity. I like that if I want to deal damage, I feel like I have the most different ways that I can do that. Justice can thwart, but its basic thwarting builds I don't think are quite as well supported as aggression's basic build supports. Aggression's ally builds, I think, have more support than Justice's as well, or protections, not as much as leadership, but it can go for the ally route that we talked about with Boot Camp. And I really think its events are very interesting, whether played, kind of on their own or hone technique. And you can hybrid some of these builds with things like fluid motion, which rewards your basic attack by playing events. So I think it does the least different things, but it has the most different ways to do its main thing, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. Now, from a solo perspective, you probably want to be doing a mix of things outside of Rush.
Yeah.
So, yeah, no, I get that. It definitely hasn't branched out as much as maybe it could have. I think they have attempted to do that, and they've been cautious about it, and they've missed the mark. So I'm talking about things like Smash the Problem, that kind of thing. It has thwarting options. Chase them down in the core set. Really well costed card, 0 cost, 2 threat removed, but you need a minion, which is at its rarest in solo play, where you need the thwarting the most. So it has some little issues there.
Yeah, and it kind of boils down to how granular do you want to, how nuanced do you want to be with your definition of doing different things, because they're you're doing a lot of damage. It's just how do you go about doing that? And I like to think of that as different ways of playing aggression, right? If I'm playing an ally swarm, consider that different than a basic attack damage. Now you're still throwing a ton of damage, and it's not maybe as different as float like a butterfly in justice versus thwarting in justice. Like that's a damage based justice build versus a thwarting based justice build. But I do like the different options that aggression gives us and the different tools that aggression gives us to do damage, because damage is the win condition in the majority of our scenarios. And so with that, I see aggression as being fairly diverse in terms of how you can build it. But you get pretty granular. You have to get pretty granular in order to make that argument.
Yeah. Yeah, we've got some interesting questions here. Something that kind of ties into kind of the state of aggression is from someone called Jav Goro, and they say, do you feel that hero damage dealing cards being plentiful and as a rule better than aspect cards hampers aggression?
I think in the lens of a true solo where you do have to handle everything that the villain is throwing at you, you have to handle threat, you have to handle minions, you have to handle villain damage, you have to handle side schemes. Yes, I think a lot of the times with the reduced health value that the villain has, the hero damage dealing cards can usually deal with the majority of the damage that the encounter is throwing at you. I think that goes away a little bit in higher player count games because you're going to be dealing with more minions, and that's kind of what I view as the role of the aggression player at the table in a higher player count game. Is they are there for minion control, and then the hero cards from any of the characters at the table are going to be that villain damage. Now, a lot of that villain damage will come from the aggression, or yeah, from the aggression player, but I think your role kind of shifts and skews a little bit, and you're not throwing damage at the villain. Your role is to take care of the minions so that the other players can do what they need to do, and then collectively our heroes can throw damage at the villain. And so, kind of yes, especially towards the new or the lower player counts.
Yeah, I basically agree. Every character can find damage if they need it in like a solo perspective for the most part, which is probably another reason where aggression maybe doesn't shine so much in solo because it's not providing what's quite needed quite so much in most cases. I even think from a design perspective, I think they're quite cautious with handing out damage because people have damage, and Rush is already, like you say, getting pretty strong. There's some pretty impressive things you can do with it, and it's difficult from where they draw the line. Because if they give too much more good damage to aggression, scenario's just going to be over in solo. But from my perspective, I don't think it matters a huge amount because the people who like to rush will rush, and the people who don't like to won't. So it's debatable, but I definitely think it means when I'm trying to decide on my team for multiplayer, especially for 2-player, I never think, oh, I need aggression. Sometimes I
Yeah.
need justice, but I never need aggression.
Yeah. I think the closest you get to needing aggression would be something in like an Ultron, where there's just a lot of answers in aggression for multiple minions. But I agree. I don't ever sit down and like, oh my gosh, we're not going to be able to beat this without aggression. And I guess like this is going off of our questions and off of our outline a little bit, but if you had the keys to the kingdom and you could kind of modify aggression and you're not doing damage dealing cards because of what you just said, how would you modify or expand the red aspect?
I think the way I'd like it expanded is a little bit like how protection has been expanded. So protection has a card called Hard Knocks, which is a damage dealing attack. That's kind of aggression territory, but it gives a tough card. So maybe in aggression, I can have a thwarting card that also gives me some kind of damage. Um, I don't necessarily need more damage, but I think they can use damage or attacking as a platform for other effects that characters in aggression might need for solo play, if that makes sense. I
Hmm.
think another example could be that Justice has turned the tide. Now, that is basically the equivalent of Chase Them Down. You know, Chase Them Down triggers when you defeat a minion, remove threat. Turn the tide is defeat a scheme, deal damage. But the main scheme is always there to reduce to 0, which does let you trigger Turn the Tide, but Chase Them Down doesn't. So I think thwarting tools which are consistent is what I would like.
Okay. Yeah. That I like. Yeah, thwarting's always good. Um, I'm trying to figure out like what boundaries they have or what levers they have to pull. I think leaning more into some of the ally upgrades could be kind of interesting. Now you're stepping on leadership toes at that point, but I think that would be cool. We have like energy spear, we have those types of cards that increase the allies' attack. I think that would be kind of interesting to kind of lean more into boot camp and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fine. Leadership does have a couple of attacks and different things as well. So I'm sure we could have one or two more upgrades, throughout the aspects, even not just aggression. And I don't think leadership's ever going to be struggling for power or such. I don't think it's ever going to be eclipsed as who can do better with allies necessarily. Even though there's some really good ally-based builds in different aspects. So yeah, I think that's really fun too. And something I just sort of thought about, which is kind of related, is in Iceman's pack, we've just got all these cards which interact with upgrades being on minions.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see Danger Room for upgrades. So what I mean by that is Danger Room is an Alter Ego support, and when you play a X-Men character, you basically get to search your deck for the right upgrade to go on that ally. Well, what if when a minion comes in, I get to put the right upgrade on that minion? Something that lets me do it consistently, not necessarily more powerful, but more consistently. Happy to pay for it, or have some kind of balancing factor. But I think if they could make putting upgrades on minions, particularly at lower player counts where it is the least reliable, better, I think that'd be a really fun change.
Yeah, and to kind of bounce off of that, and this is not my idea. I don't actually remember where I saw this, so I'm sorry I'm not giving credit, but we got like player side schemes, which I feel like gave Justice a pretty decent boost where you're putting, side schemes out there. But I saw someone came up with the idea of like player minions, where like punching bags or training minions or something like that, where you could throw that out there, and if you defeat them, then you can trigger all of your, you know, minion killing benefits as well as getting a bonus. And so I thought that was a cool idea and something that could really kind of give a boost to aggression, like side schemes gave a boost to justice, because justice was really hurting. And so um, I thought that was a really clever idea.
That is fun. That basically reminds me of minion summoning with things like Looking for Trouble and Angela. And what I
Yeah.
find interesting about that is those are cards that I think that have gotten worse from when they arrived. I feel like the average minion might necessarily take more damage to defeat, but they have more keywords, more when revealed, more when defeated. They're just a little bit more complicated now. And I feel like I don't really ever want to put Looking for Trouble, even though it's threat removal, in my aggression decks for the most part.
Yeah. Hmm.
Maybe something more to reward minion summoning to kind of refresh that out could be good.
Yeah.
That would help
That
Valkyrie.
yeah. 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 I do enjoy the minion summoning way of playing, especially in solo, because in solo you're top decking. If you are building for a minion control build, you're top decking coping for that minion.
Yeah.
Or if you bring Angela, you bring Looking for Trouble, Defender of the Nine Realms, those Choose of the Slain. Choose of the Slain is such a good card.
It's so
uh
good.
that kind of stuff to bring those minions in. I like that. I guess like we don't have, so it's kind of similar to Looking for Trouble, but we have taunt and protection. We have one way or another in justice. We have a minion summoning, but we don't have something that like highly rewards bringing minions out, right? Like 3 threat from the main scheme is not, I don't think, on the level as +3 cards or, well, yeah, it's +3 cards in both instances. And so it'd be kind of interesting, if highly eclipsed Choose of the Slain by Valkyrie, but something like go get a minion and draw some cards. But I think that that could be a fun way to really boost that card. And I think that kind of leads into a question from Francis Lee. What is the least used aggression card that you think has the most potential, either with the current card pool or maybe just one new card short of fantastic? So like what are some of these kind of archetypes or these cards that are just so close to being awesome that they could breathe some new life into?
Yeah, this is a great question. Obviously, we've just talked about looking for trouble. I think that's definitely a contender. I know a lot of people are very keen to get the equivalent of Monica Chang for tag team
Oh yeah,
because that
give me
would
that.
just yeah. I'm gonna say this as well. This is my hot take. I don't think tag team is as bad as its reputation would have people believe because it's a free cost card and you can deal 2 damage, 2 damage, and 2 damage. It will avoid retaliate, it will avoid stun, and you know Black Widow has Dance of Death, and Psylocke has Flyer of Blades, which will also deal, 6 damage, I believe, for that cost. Now it's instant, so Tag Team does take a while to get its, value, but it is an aspect card. I do think it's kind of interesting. The only problem I have, and I think this relates to another question, but when I look at allies and the damage they can put out for a similar cost and then be flexible into other things, it really definitely falls behind in terms of power in that way. But I would like to see it get a boost. I think the idea of tag team, just I'm a hero, but I've got a bunch of soldiers or agents or something
Yeah,
with me. It's so good and thematic. I want tag team. I want multiple cards that interact with tag team. I want a support that rewards me when I use it or something. I don't know. That whole kind of thing I think is really fun. We have what? Here's the thing for the whole game in general. We have heroes and lots of heroes and things we can bring in. What if I want to work with some normal civilians and stuff? I'd love to see that fleshed out. We do have Beat Cop in Justice, but maybe I could call them up to arrest a baddie. Maybe we have Med Team in Protection, but I don't know. I feel like they could push the kind of that thing a little bit more.
and yeah, I want Nick Fury or someone to come in and just give a nice little like field archetype boost. I really do enjoy the shield build,
Yeah.
but I feel like I'm kind of limited to the justice aspect if I want to, really capitalize on that with Monica and all the field agents and stuff like that. And so you and this is off topic at this point, but like you said you want that for tag team. I want that for med team. I love med team. I think med
Yeah.
team is probably the strongest team out there, but I want something that pulls those benefits those incentivizes the use of those to make them on par if you build them to your aggression allies. Because, like you said, why not just run three other allies at that point?
Yeah.
So
So with the cards we have a question here from Justin Vamp 15, and they say if you could only get 3 hero packs for aggression deck building, which 3 would you suggest? So with the cards we actually have and how they interact, what would you recommend to people?
that's a really good question. That's a really really good question, Justin. My biggest hesitation in that is I feel like aggression is probably the aspect that has the least amount of synergy within their own hero packs, and a lot of like aggression effective aggression builds need multiple hero packs. I think the best one would probably be Nova. That's where my snap decision, my snap thought went to. But Nova comes with home technique, 1 by 1, and so that kind of opens up a lot of that strategy. Plus, you get Nova, who's a really fun hero. But I think home technique is one of the biggest um, boons that aggression has gotten in a while, and kind of really shook up that red aspect. And so I think my initial gut reaction is Nova is probably going to be one of the better ones to go for. Um, and I'm going to let you comment on that while I think of some more.
Well, we could do a total of 3 between us. And it's
Yeah, there you go.
interesting. It's interesting how for aggression deck building, my first thought is if for solo player, I'm kind of thinking about basic allies. If people want to have, consistent success, getting a solid source of threat removal, I think is going to be really important. But that's not necessarily aggression deck building. uh, I do recommend Wasp as a good pack for people. It comes with boot camp that kind of
Mhm.
unlocks more ally centric builds. And then you get basic allies like Ironheart and Spider-Man, Mars Morales, basic ally, who are, they're perfectly good in aggression decks. You can use them elsewhere as well. That's really good. Uh, Interesting talking about, before about aggression and has it got much help lately or not. Iceman's pack, I don't think really uplifted it, but it came with Gold Balls, who I think is completely busted. But all these cards we got more recently about, you have to be below half health to get this bonus and so on, aren't too generally applicable. But we did get Wolverine's pack, which comes with Psylocke and Sunfire, which I think are huge. You can put those in basically any aggression deck. So I think that's a solid shout as well. And I do really like Nova. I think Hone Technique is so much fun. Those packs don't necessarily synergize with each other, but in a general sense, those are very, very good.
Yeah. Nice. So like we talking about some cards, we have a question from the Masked Hero. So they say, having rekindled my love affair for Skilled Strike, what aggro card, if any, have you rediscovered in 2024?
That's a really good question. I don't know if there's one sort of old card that I'm suddenly using more that I didn't before, but an old card that I do really like that I've sort of hinted at already is, well, I talked about liking Black Panther in aggression, and I talked about Yarnborn, but I also like him with Hone Technique. So I like him with Hone Technique, and I'm going to pronounce this wrong. I think Fusillade? I hate this word. This is
Fusillade, yeah.
Yeah. But this is exhaust a weapon, deal 5 damage to an enemy. Well, if you have a weapon that you can get the benefit from without exhausting, that's kind of a free cost. You're not really paying anything if you weren't going to exhaust it anyway for something. And combined with Hone Technique, it becomes a 2-cost card that deals 7 damage, which is very, very flexible and nice. But it's not, a super new or super old card that I've suddenly rediscovered useful, but you can use it with magic and her weapon. You can use Mean Swing with that as well. So that's probably my best answer I have for that. And I guess I talked about it with Wolverine. I'm loving Moment of Triumph in combination with that full body charge.
Yeah. I'm looking through my old hero new trick playlist where I go back because and honestly I'm not finding a ton of aggression based builds except for kind of the Cyclops stuff, but
I got one.
Yeah, go for it.
Bishop and toe-to-toe.
There you go. Toe-to-toe has been a good one, yeah. Oh, Bishop and toe-to-toe is fun. Yeah, that's a good one. Okay, I like that. And then in that sense, like also, is it counterattack? Yeah,
yes.
Counterattack, where you can kind of combo that where you get to deal damage back to the attacking enemy based on how much you took. And so Bishop just wants to take that damage. That's a good one. Yeah, okay, sweet. I'm glad you called that. And then also, maybe not in terms of what is newly supported, but in terms of a personal, I've really started to want to play around with fluid motion more. And so it's not necessarily a new card that's got a ton of new love, but fluid motion where you get +1 attack based on how many events you've played. So that's been something similar to the Skilled Strike, where I don't necessarily know if there's been a ton of new support for that card. It's just been something that recently in the last couple of months I've been like, ooh, I wanna make that. I wanna have fun with that.
Nice. Yeah, I do love fluid motion. I like all these different ways. I like the hybrid cards. Back to the old question, very, very quickly. If I could, change up aggression or do anything, I would love some more cards that kind of had hybrid, factors. So I love X-Men Utopia aggression builds because I can beef up my, attack stat. Then I can play an ally to ready. So it's kind of synergizing allies with basic attacking. And I kind of love that kind of thing where one thing feeds into the other. I think that's super fun.
Yeah. And then we have to mention Hulk with magic, right? Like,
oh yes.
the Hulk ally, whenever you attack with that incredible 3 attack for 2 costs. I mean, Hulk's stats are awesome. The risk you run is, killing yourself and everyone around you. But if you can justify either with Domino, swapping the top card with that physical, or Magic, you see what the top card of your deck is at all times. Hulk at that point is a lot less risky to run, and so you can make sure that you have the physical. So Hulk swinging for 5, which is not pretty. It is very significant for a 2-cost ally.
Oh, it's devastating. I love the Hulk ally in general. I think it might be one of my favorite aggression cards. Maybe my favorite one. I just love how thematic
That's
it is.
fun.
because
Yeah.
you don't know what he's going to do. Who's he going to hit? Is he going to hit everyone? Is he going to leap out of here and we won't see him again? He'll wake up in a field in like 2 days somewhere or something. I don't know. But 3 damage and then 2 damage, getting the physical resource discarded from him is so good. I think Magic's the best at it. I love playing Magic that way. So that is a great shout too. So many good ones.
Nice. Yeah, there are a lot of good aggression cards. I do love it. Kind of along that same line, Jay Atkinson asked which aggression cards from the first wave that were considered crummy have seen a resurgence in more recent waves. And then on the flip side, which ones have gone towards the ways side in terms of effectiveness?
That's a good question. I almost kind of feel like we've answered that slightly here. I talked about Tac Team, which people would use, in the core set. But now that's a free cost card that will get me 6 damage. If I play the Gold Balls ally today, I'll get 12 damage for the same cost. And it's not exactly the same. I have to discard some cards and so on. But considering he could block or, whatever, I think it definitely evens out. So that's one part of it. And there's also, what old cards get, maybe weren't so good. Hawk has always been good for his cost. But, I remember back in the day, you would just play him and block with him. He was, and, you still do that today to some degree. But with Domino and Magic in particular, even though characters like Star-Lord and Spider-Woman can, look or manipulate the top of their deck a bit, with these new characters, it's become easier than ever. So I think he's got, this massive boost. Don't know if any other ones are springing to mind right now. I bet there are some. If we're considering Hone Technique new, that obviously boosted a ton of cards. I'm looking at Dive Bomb in particular.
Yep. The one that came to my mind is not necessarily a bad card, but I would say Chasing Them Down. I think that newer heroes are more well-rounded and they typically have more thwarting and more access to threat removal in their kits than some of the older heroes did. And so I think Chase Them Down was a really good card for some of the older heroes, where it's not as needed in some of the newer heroes just because you have the answers to the threat. And I'm looking at it through a solo lens at this point, but like you don't necessarily need Chase Them Down as much as some of the older heroes needed because you have pretty efficient thwarting options in the hero kit. But I do want to go back to Hone Technique because that leads into another question that we got from Rathamak, which is why is Hone Technique so highly valued and is it overrated?
Ooh, another good question. It's so highly valued because it adds so much value. And I suppose for the listeners, so if you're not familiar with it, Hone Technique is a free cost upgrade. It does have a requirement of 2 mental resources, or you can't play it if you're not paying with at least 2 mentals. But then every time you play an aggression attack event, if you paid for it with at least 1 mental resource, you increase the damage it deals by its cost, which is crazy. Although the crazy thing is, people call this card overpowered. Generally, I don't think it is. I don't think it's overpowered. I think it's a sign of how underpowered aggression's events were in the first place. I think they're very cautiously costed and priced, So I think it's good. And I kind of feel like it's a nice balance to give out something that powerful because you have to find it, play it. Most rush decks aren't running Hone Technique, which kind of does what I think, I'm just assuming at this point, the designers want. You can't just rush out of the gate with it, but you can have some juicy aggression events with it. And so if people think it's overpowered, I think they're slightly overrating it, with the one caveat that I think Dive Bomb builds in, let's say, 4-player, where I can just clear the board with 1 attack, that's kind of crazy, and I don't think anything else can keep up with that. Dive Bomb is a card that says deal 7 damage to an enemy, deal 1 damage to each other enemy. So if you're increasing it by its cost, which is 4, it's 11 damage to 1 target, and then 5 damage to everything else. And you can boost that even more with things like, aggressive energy, but just 5 damage across the board in a 4-player game, sometimes that can take out like 4 or 5 minions, sometimes even more. It's just incredibly good. And even if it doesn't, it's kind of good on just 1 minion, or arguably on just the villain, that 11 damage. So that is kind of crazy good. And I don't think the new expensive cards like Full Body Charge and Take That, which are kind of the more expensive aggression events that non-aerial characters can use because Dive Bomb is locked, I don't think they really keep up. But, in most other circumstances, outside of 4-player Dive Bomb, I think it's highly valuable because it is a massive damage boost, but it is not overpowered because the aggression events didn't start super strong. And actually, as we kind of said earlier on, heroes having such good damage baseline doesn't, there isn't a need for these huge damage hits.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with everything that you just said. I think I think people think that hone technique is so powerful because at least me, I don't think of hone technique without thinking of dive bomb. And I think dive bomb is the outlier in what hone technique can bring to the table. And I'm honestly kind of surprised that dive bomb has the attack keyword because I think a lot of the multi-hit attacks are not necessarily attacks. And so some of them are. I'm starting to go back on that statement, but I
Very
think
few.
very few of them are. And so I think if dive bomb was not an attack, one, it would go back to not being played, but it would also like I think hone technique would not be considered, one of these insane cards just because hone tech if you have an aerial character at the table, dive bomb hone technique is always in consideration as a run because it is so effective, it is so much damage with minion slaying, Hall of Heroes. Like you can fill up Hall of Heroes immediately, and so it gets a little crazy with what you can do. But I do like hone technique. I like hone technique even more when I'm not running it with dive bomb because I think it with dive bomb in a multiplayer game gets a little crazy for my taste.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm gonna throw out the hot take out of there. I feel like even though it's an optional rules thing, I feel like they need to tweak dive bomb with it. This is just my one thing. The one thing I think is too good with aggression is that multiplayer hone technique dive bomb. And I know that will
Yeah.
upset some people. My partner absolutely loves hone technique dive bomb. People like the big numbers and it's fun. I just don't think anything else can keep up. And I do think it's maybe too good to just have that. But I'm sort of repeating myself at that point. It is really fun. And I do really like hone technique as well.
Yeah, yeah. So it's I think it is highly valued, but I don't think outside going back to the question, I don't think outside of dive bomb, hone technique is overrated. It's a lot to set up. It is tough to get onto the table if you don't have wild resources, if you don't have resource generators. You're not running a ton of mental in aggression. Now, if you're running a hone technique build, you maybe, but it's also like, what if hone technique's at the bottom of your deck? And I know a lot of players will run, 2 to 3 copies of hone technique just so you have the mental resource and you can see it quicker. But I mean, that can be a big ask in a lot of scenarios. And then you get caught off guard and then you're sad.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely one of those players that will run multiple hone techniques. Normally, if I'm building into hone technique, I'm probably bringing at least 2. And then I want a certain amount of events that are going to really benefit from it. And that dominates a lot of the deck building space, which is very tight now with all these side schemes and things, which are really fun to put into your deck. And the resource thing is a great point as well. That is kind of the big obstacle. And if you're Domino or Psylocke, you have as many mental resources
Right.
as you could ever dream of. But most characters, resources on aggression are so interesting. I do kind of like that they are so meaningful. For hone technique, I'm always trying to figure out what are the best cards I can have with mental resources. I'm trying to bring them together. When I'm maybe doing a different build though, like Yarnborn and Dropkick, I'm looking for physicals. And when I saw that Gold Balls, this really high damage new ally, has physical resource, which is very rare. Aggression gives physical resources to their allies. I'm like, oh, jackpot. That's going in the whole deck.
Nice.
So I'll be curious to see how aggression goes. And I think as the card pool expands naturally, even if we don't see any better events, as we get more better, let's say, mental resource allies and things, which will naturally we'll see that. That's going to help out hone technique, actually. That's really interesting.
Mm-hmm. We have a question from Casper Anderson, who is asking, with cards like Smash the Problem and the Direct Approach, which is another new card that I have not used a ton. Direct Approach, and Smash the Problem, I really haven't used that either, which I think kind of leads into the question. How far are we from Aggression Hulk being a solid thwarter? And I would expand this question to how far are we from the kind of flip side? You got, Float Like a Butterfly and Justice. How close are we to using those red cards for thwarting? We kind of already talked about this, but I wanted to call out Casper's question specifically.
I mean, this question, it touches on what we talked about, but this is a bit more direct, and I do like this question. Smash the Problem can get you really good threat removal, but because you have to exhaust your hero, the hidden cost, which some people don't notice, is you lose out on the damage you could have dealt by basic attacking. And
Yep.
the more thwarting you're getting is the more basic attack damage you're missing out on, which is the huge detriment. I will sometimes run a couple of them, let's say with like solo She-Hulk or something, because I can turn that into I just delete a side scheme that I otherwise would have really struggled with. But if there's no side scheme, it's not so useful. And the thing is, if I'm under pressure from multiple sources, losing that damage is horrendous, because I've obviously played aggression on these big high attack characters to attack, which is huge. And then the direct approach suffers from a similar fate. We got Overwatch as a zero cost card in Justice that duplicates Thwarting. Here we have to pay one to be able to turn, damage into Thwarting. So, I mean, it has multiple uses, right? Because you can attack multiple times with it. But it's costly to do something when you could have just dedicated that one resource into playing something. It would cost more than one resource, but I could have then, spent that money on an ally, which would help me thwart more potentially anyway. It does have some interesting uses, I will say that. But you kind of had to set up and build around it. And it's just a little bit tricky, We've seen Taunt 1 cost to get free cards, Justice 0 cost one way or another to get free cards. And then I think Overwatch and Direct Approach, and even Containment Strategy, I think it's for protection.
Yeah.
Justice tends to have a discount on these things, but they were also released at different times. I definitely think if Aggression is going to be a solid thwarter, not just, barely competent, but a solid thwarter, it needs competitive options, even if it's something more in the style of Hone Technique, where you have to set something up, but then it's a more accessible kind of thing. I don't know. Ideally, I don't think you should even need that, I guess, but there are different ways you could do it, and I think if you dedicate your whole deck to Hulk to Thwarting, you definitely can get by, but it's, it's not what I called solid. What do you think?
Yeah. I agree. I think, it's tough, because if you are boosting up that basic attack, you really don't want to be using it for anything but attack, unless in a dire situation. And at that point, you're spending a lot of resources in terms of like the card cost, but also an exhaust. And if you are using Smash the Problem, which if you can get 3 threat removal out of Smash the Problem, which is a 1 cost card, you're looking about on curve without exhausting, right? So now you're in a lot of trouble, because now you're paying 2 effective resources and 3 damage for 3 threat removal, and that's tough. But going back to the Overwatch, do you think that we're ever going to get something akin to Overwatch in Aggression, like a combo attack, where it's the same thing? Like when you deal damage, discard this attachment and deal that same amount of damage to another minion or the villain?
I think it's really possible, but I'm not sure if it will happen. I think they could, like, let's say add a 1 or 2. They could increase the cost to kind of, I don't think we'll see a 0 cost duplication of damage, I'll put it that way. But I also think the reason Justice kind of has that hyper efficient Overwatch is the same reason it has even the odds. It's because threat is the main thing that scales in multiplayer. So it kind of needed some help to maybe do that. Because I know a lot of people feel the strain of threat removal in multiplayer. So I think that was maybe more, rather than a balance thing for the aspects or a new idea, maybe it was more of a kind of this is what it needs to do its job kind of thing. And I don't necessarily think Aggression has that, especially since it has, 1x1 and melee and dive bomb. And we have that new card that came with Angel that no one really uses too much. That also hits like a group of enemies, but it does have ways to hit multiple things already.
Yeah. Bombs away.
That's the one.
Yeah. I think it would be interesting if it was limited to basic attacks. So it doesn't duplicate the event damage, because you're not going to get 22 damage off of a Hone Technique or a Hone Technique dive bomb. But like if you're spending a lot of resources pumping up your attack, and you get it up to 5, and like it'd be cool to have another little toy to deal with, because I think the downside to some of those basic attack buff builds, outside of some heroes, is minion control, because you want to be using your attack on the villain. And so if you have a little bit of an answer there with like some sort of minion upgrade, I think that could be kind of fun.
Let me hit you with a brand new idea that just occurred to me this very second. What if
Love
there
it.
was some kind of upgrade or support or something or other where you can redirect overkill damage instead of going to the villain or excess damage in general,
that's
it
fun.
goes to another minion. So you're not
That'd be
generating
cool.
more damage, right? but you can move the damage that would have been wasted or go to the villain to another minion. So
That would
sort
be
of
really cool. Yeah.
yeah. Because I love the idea of overkill in that. If I hit someone really hard, maybe the attack goes through to the villain, or I knock them into the villain or something. What if I could
Hmm.
just minion to minion? That's what I want now.
Yeah. That would be really cool. I like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. I'm down. Alrighty. Cool. Print it.
Print it now. Fantasy Flight Games, if you're listening, do it. I don't know if that will work, but if we can ever get anyone from Fantasy Flight Games on there, I will apply pressure. Are there any other cards or anything about aggression you want to talk about?
um,
I've got
edit out the
one,
dead space. Yeah. What's up?
and I want to say to you: have you used Bring It lately?
Bring it. Yes, I have. I really like Bring It. Bring It is the card where you get to draw cards equal to the number of minions you're engaged with.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I enjoy Bring It. Bring It actually makes it into a surprising number of my decks, but I've started to use Bring It more as a, and I need to figure out a term, because Bring It is a type of card that I build for the scenario, not necessarily for the hero in most situations. And so, like, if I'm playing mutagen formula, if I'm playing Ultron, I'm running Bring It if I'm playing aggression,
yeah,
because at worst it just cycles itself, and at best it nets multiple cards. But I do really like Bring It. I like the minion like summoning type of archetype, and then Bring It um just combos off of that really well. Love it in Vision, right? Just
yeah.
gather all the minions and just draw. Oh yeah, no, I very much enjoy Bring It, and it's one of those cards that if the scenario presents itself, I'm probably running it.
Yeah, there's kind of almost a name for it. I can't remember what it is. I've had Brant use it, but there's kind of like the strategy where you maybe just keep minions around instead of defeating them and just farm cards of them if your health can take it.
Yeah,
Wolverine's got that card where every time he takes an attack, he gets to draw a card, which goes away if you got Alter Ego, of course, but you can build into it. Nightcrawler's pack is coming with stuff that when you defeat minions in the villain phase, you get bonuses, which might incentivize people on the table to keep them around a bit more, sometimes to make sure they've got a target for it. Maybe there's some kind of multiplayer synergy there. So I think Bring It's a really, really interesting card. I'm surprised it doesn't have a limit, like max 3 cards or something. So you can break the game with it if you go full vision and stack up those Ultra Insurance. But it's a really fun card that I wanted to bring some attention to and show some love to.
yeah, I huge fan of Bring It. Huge fan of Bring It. What's the most cards you've drawn from? Do you have an idea or a ballpark
I don't
estimate?
have anything in my head right now.
I don't know how many, but I know what game it was. I did a two-handed gameplay with Nova and Vision,
Oh.
and which if you have not tried that two-handed combo, do it, because Vision can just sit in intangible and wait for unleash the Nova Force from Nova, and then Nova gets to draw a billion cards, and it's a ton of fun. But I I I remember stacking minions on top of each other. So that's my, I don't know how many, but it was significant and fun.
I can imagine it was a lot. We've got a couple of other questions that are not related to aggression, and one of them is from Dave W. And they asked the question, when will Widow's Bite be reruled to stop a Quickstrike attack? And I have some quite strong feelings on this one, so if you don't have an answer, let me know and I will talk about it. But what do you think about this in general?
I mean, like, you talk about it. I don't know if I really have a preference.
So, if people don't know, the official ruling is that Widow's Bite, when a minion enters play, it will get stunned, but if it has Quick Strike, the Quick Strike starts first, so you stun that minion, but the Quick Strike keeps happening, which is a very interesting ruling that I feel like kind of defeats some of the purpose of the card. So I don't know when it will, but it's definitely something that I would maybe be in favor with. They can make that work within the rules in general. And I think most people will play it, not with that ruling, and so it might not really. It only affects you if you let it affect you anyway. But that was something I was curious to talk about.
Yeah, I think I do in general like the fact that printed keywords are the top priority. So quick strike, toughness, all of this takes priority. I think the triggering timing could be where they could play with that, right? Quick strike is also when entering play. Widow's Bite is when entering play. Widow's Bite isn't response, right? Yeah, it would have to be a response. And so Yeah, I mean, like the rule set as it is now, I think it gets really murky if you change it. But like thematically, it makes a lot of sense that Widow's Bite should supersede. But from a mechanical standpoint, I'm afraid of what Pandora's box that would open.
It could just be a very soft errata on, Widow's Bite. It could have, errata and cancel any quick strike in progress, and that
Mm.
basically solves it entirely. I don't know,
Yeah,
but I'd like to keep the theme of, someone comes in play and you get to shut them down. I think that's really fun.
that is fun. That is fun. One of the other questions that we got is from On the Fence, and they ask, is it more fun to win the game easily or lose the game badly?
Neither. This is such a tough one because I think I've talked about in other episodes and things. So maybe it's on my channel, but when my friends play and they if I'm playing two player and they pick a really strong hero and deck, and I'm like, okay, I know we've won this scenario before we've started, basically,
Yeah.
in a lot of cases, and the challenge to me, I don't play Marvel Champions to be, for the difficulty, which I think we talked about this as well. Would rather play something like Spirit Island or Arkham or something for a difficult experience. But at the same time, I do like to be challenged. If I know I'm just going to win, I'm not super interested. But at the
Mm.
same time, if I get annihilated really badly, uh, it does have a bit of a sour feeling. But I think on those grounds, I'm going to go with I'd rather things go really badly and I try and adapt to it or change than things just go too easy the whole time, play a whole game out, and I didn't feel like I ever really had, push myself or challenge anything.
Yeah, for me, I think a couple more variables need to be considered for me to kind of answer the question. Because if I win the game easily, Doctor Strange versus Absorbing Man, that's not super fun.
Yeah.
But if I can win the game and pull off this epic combo and it feels really easy, but like I got to try something new and like take a hero through like maybe a route that they wouldn't normally go through, I enjoy that. Like you think of like the magic terms, like the Spike Timmy and Jimmy or whatever they are, like the
Yeah.
different styles of play. I very much like doing cool things in card games. And so if I can do that and it turns out to be an easy win, I enjoy that. But if it's something that's not necessarily a cool way to play, it's a OP hero against a really easy villain. I don't necessarily enjoy that. And on the flip side of the coin, if it feels unfair for a loss, I don't enjoy that, right? I don't necessarily enjoy Ronan surging to infinity and then hitting me with two fanaticisms and just like, okay, like that's cool, right? Like I don't enjoy that. But if it is a scenario that is challenging and can steamroll me and then I have to tweak and modify, this feels very much like Lord of the Rings at that point, where Lord of the Rings early, you have some of those scenarios where it's just like, okay, well, I flipped the cards and I lost. That sucks. But there are scenarios where um, you have to tech against that scenario, you lose, and then you modify and you kind of like you figure it out, you figure the puzzle out. And so I prefer if I guess it boils down to if I lose badly, but I understand why I lost and I can change my play style and try it again, I enjoy that. But I don't like losing because collector collects his own minions. I'm like, okay, man, it's just dumb.
Yeah, I think that's fair. So this is the part of the podcast where we talk about what we're doing next, both on our channels, maybe just playing in real life, anything like that. And I'm curious, Nelson, what are you up to?
So I have two answers for this. I'm gonna answer what's on the channel, but I also want to talk about what we've been playing in real life and what I have not been streaming. My wife and I have been playing through Aeon's End, the Legacy of Gravehold, which is the second legacy box of Aeon's End. I've done Aeon's End on the channel before, and I probably will do some more. I love that game. It's a deck building game. But Legacy of Gravehold is a legacy version, so you are modifying cards, you're writing on cards, you're destroying cards, you're losing mages, you're giving mages new abilities. And we played the first one, and we're about halfway through the second one, and both of them have just been phenomenal games. And so I wanted to shout that out. That's one of those games that I don't think, I guess you probably could stream it. It's just it ruins the magic for anyone who hasn't played it because you're opening boxes and new things are happening. And so I wanted to shout that out because I've been having a ton of fun with the Legacy of Greyfold. And then coming up on the channel, we're in the busy season of of content creation for board games with like con season. And so Gen Con's coming up in a couple of weeks. I just got back from Origins. I'm doing a lot of stuff. And so content creation for me has slowed down more than I wanted it to, but I've been trying to do more recorded gameplays, and not necessarily just two-handed, but I've been doing some more solo recorded stuff just because I don't want to stream at 10 p.m. at night, but I can do a recorded game and then drop that at some point. And so I've been trying to do some more recorded plays to try and balance out some of the vacation. I don't even know if it's vacation. The time away from the streaming studio that I have coming up.
That makes me glad that I don't really do other board game content because it sounds very busy.
It is. It's busy.
So a few days ago, we did actually just pick up the Dream Eaters Investigator box for Arkham Horror. So that's fun.
Nice.
So I've actually got a deck out on the table now for Patrice. She actually works like a Marvel Champions character where you draw 5 new cards every turn.
Nice.
So I called my deck Marvel Champions. It's not a thematic deck. And we'll see how that's going to work out. I'm hopefully playing that tonight. On my channel, I'm sort of continuing what I talked about last time, but maybe more. I've been, my problem has not been that it's a board game thing, but maybe that's a summer thing. Lots of things are happening. So I'm continuing with some stuff about villains, and modular sets is my key focus. And something that I think will have happened by the time this podcast releases, but hasn't happened at the time of recording. It's happening, in a day or so. Me, Nelson, and Web Warrior Fanatic are taking on Super Thanos, as we talked about in the previous podcast episode. So I don't know if the view on demand video will be around, but I know Nelson's probably going to put on his channel the kind of game of it. So keep an eye out for that on YouTube, I would say. Is that correct?
Yeah, that'll be on YouTube. My guess is that if you're listening to this on the release day, I'll probably have posted it tomorrow. So I'll probably post it on Tuesday. The look at the calendar is 16th would be my guess.
Awesome. That sounds really good. I'm looking forward to that game.
It's gonna be intense. I'm pumped. We were theory crafting before we started the podcast of our decks. I think we got some clever builds coming up to try and counter the deity that is Thanos.
Yeah. So that's gonna be really fun. And yeah, I think next time on the podcast, as we talked about aggression today, I think the natural place to move on to is Justice. We got Jubilee's pack coming out with new Justice cards, so that will all be some really fun stuff to talk about.
Nice. Yeah, I'm excited to talk about Justice, and then make sure to follow Villain Theory's channel and keep an eye out for the community page, because we are loving the questions that y'all are sending in. And so there's going to be another post there that you can ask more questions, or you can email them to shadowofthecast@gmail.com to get on and ask your questions and see what we got.
Yeah, if your question wasn't answered today, we had a lot of them, but there's only so many we can answer. But we really enjoy all of them. I read all of them. So thank you so much. And I think that about does it. So I'm going to say again, Nelson, as every time, thank you for being here. This was a fun discussion.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's always a good time.
And thank you everyone for listening. See you next time.
See you.
Bye.
Bye.